All right, you asked for it. Here it is, the only oversimplified video I have not done a reaction to. Every video that I upload, there's somebody who says, oversimplified Three Kingdoms. So here it is. We're going to do it today. A couple of things up front before we dive into this. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Chris. I don't introduce myself very often on here. I live in Northeast Ohio. I went to school for history. But wanted to be a history teacher. Didn't work out that way. My life went another direction, so this has become my outlet for history. I do a mix of reaction videos. In fact, December 8th will be the 1-year anniversary of my very first reaction video. So we're going to be doing some special stuff related to the 1-year anniversary of reactions and looking back on some of my favorite ones that I've done. But I also do a lot of original content, going to visit battlefields, vlogs about topics of history that interest me, things like that. So I hope you'll check out the channel, explore that variety of things. I don't really consider what I do necessarily to be reactions because I try to add something of value, try to maybe add something you did not know, try to make some historical parallels to other eras of history because we believe that history rhymes, even if it doesn't necessarily repeat itself. So, but the goal here is to learn something new. And I'll confess up front, I do not know a lot about Japanese history. I do not know a lot about Chinese history or just East Asian history in general. I'm going into this one pretty blind as far as what I can offer, but I will try to offer some information. We'll look some things up where warranted. I hope you enjoy it, and if not already done so, please consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you want to see more content from battlefields around the world, including Europe, which hopefully will be coming in the next couple of months, please consider becoming a patron where all of the money goes directly to funding my travel to go to historic sites and bring you guys original content. Here we go.
The brand new strategy game from the multi-award winning Total War series. Support my channel by using the link in the description.
Good game, by the way. I've played that one.
Buy the game on Steam. Also, new merch available now in the store, including a mystery new character pin. I wonder who it could be. Ancient China. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. The children are playing in the village square. What a wonderful time to be alive! Hey, the Yellow River flooded again and destroyed all your crops. And also we're being raided by nomadic tribesmen. And also this period of Chinese history may be entirely mythical, meaning you may not even exist. Well, that would certainly explain the laser eyes. Chinese civilization began around the year 2000 BC when the possibly mythical Xia dynasty was formed. Throughout China's history, dynasties would usually rise up with a powerful leader who worked for the good of the people. But over time, the leaders would become more corrupt and self-serving. Someone would inevitably build a lake of alcohol, and the angry populace would overthrow them, giving...
I need to know if that really happened. So if we are to assume that this dynasty really did exist, as he said, you know, a lot of it is mythology, and that's true with a lot of early history because we don't necessarily have a lot of sources for a lot of this stuff. So you have to try and discern what's mythology, what's history, and there's probably a truth somewhere in the middle. So I think I would err on the side of saying that maybe not all the details of what we know about this time are true, but I think the big picture probably is true. But here we go. According to Liu Chang, I guess that's how it's pronounced. I'm terrible with Chinese. His book, written around 18 BC. So this is, you know, what, 1,500, 2,000 years later. He was corrupted by his infatuation with a concubine who was beautiful but completely lacking in virtue. Among other things, she liked to drink, enjoyed music, and also had a penchant for jugglers and sing-song girls. Apparently, she had him order a lake of wine made. How do you even, like, keep that? I don't know. I guess seal it with something. They both sailed about in the alcohol lake in an orgy of drunken naked men and women bathing and drinking. She then commanded 3,000 men to drink the lake dry, only to laugh when they all drowned. So again, that's one of those things. Is it just trying to make a point about who this person was and maybe exaggerating to make that point? I don't know.
Way for a new dynasty to rise. Following this pattern, the Xia dynasty was replaced by the Shang, who liked bronze and writing, but then the leaders got corrupt and were replaced by the Zhou, who liked iron and philosophy. But that one sort of just fell apart and was replaced by the Qin, who liked building walls.
You'll notice every one of these dynasties that's replacing the previous one, has a little bit more territory. It grew each time. I mean, check that out. It seems like, each dynasty that took over expanded the territory of China a little bit.
Shang, who liked bronze and writing, but then the leaders got corrupt and were replaced by the Zhou, who liked iron and philosophy. But that one sort of just fell apart and was replaced by the Qin, who liked building walls and people made out of rock. But they were pretty tyrannical from the...
So those are the Terracotta Army, which is one of the most incredible historic finds in all of history. It's literally thousands of life-size soldiers carved out of, I don't know if is it rock? I guess it is. And when they discovered this, it was just an incredible thing.
Pretty tyrannical from the start, and were quickly replaced by the Han, who liked creating new trade routes and getting in touch with their emotions. In line with this pattern, the Han Dynasty came about under the strong...
And a lot of the Han Dynasty is basically a good bit of modern China, and even some of what you see North Korea there. So that's, now we're starting to get into the borders of what we know China today to be. China's got a little more territory over here, but...
Strong and popular leadership of Emperor Gaozu, the dynasty remained firmly in place for over 4 centuries and was considered a golden age in Chinese history, developing new forms of art, political thinking, technology. Oh, looks like all the leaders got corrupt. See...
This happens all the time. Corruption was a major problem in the European dynasties as well. Certainly in places like Rome, the Roman Empire, you had constant corruption at the top. What do they say? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Same kind of thing happening here.
Probably the biggest problem in ancient China's political system that allowed so much corruption to come about all the time was a little something called court culture. Let me explain. Imagine for me, if you will, that you are the son of the Chinese emperor. Hooray! Now, apart from how weird it is that you have a ton of stepmoms and many of them would like to kill you, and also all of your friends are middle-aged dudes with no dongs.
Hold on a second. Eunuchs do not have no dongs. Eunuchs have no testicles. Just a point of clarification.
Life's pretty alright. One day, your father says, "Son, I know our relationship hasn't been the best, and I've never said this before, but I just want to let you know that I love you." Oh no, I'm having a heart attack! Look at you. Now you're the emperor. I'm so proud of you. But wait, you are but a...
This reminds me a little bit of Tsar Nicholas II, whose father never really prepared him to be Tsar, and so when he becomes the ruler, the Emperor of Russia, he really just has not been trained or prepared for it. And you can see this in all kinds of other kingdoms and dynasties where you have a young person come to the throne who's not prepared, who gets taken advantage of by the more powerful adults of the world. And a lot of times dynasties get overthrown, nations get conquered when they have a child emperor or king.
Child and have no idea how to rule over a massive empire. Fret not, because just about everyone in your court wants to help you out with that. Hey man, remember me? I'm your mom's bro. Anyway, I heard you needed someone to rule over China for you. To help you rule China. So hey, here's a popsicle. I hope we can get along.
And honestly, if you think about it, imagine trying to rule an empire of that size in a time when you don't have technology. It's not like you can just have your hand on everything. It's not like today where you can pick up the phone and call, or you can have a video conference, or even 100 years ago where you could send a telegram, or you had radio and things like that. This is a time when it would have taken months to get messages to and from the far reaches of your kingdom.
No way, man. We've been your friends and your personal caretakers your whole life. And even though we may have no dongs, I think you should give us all the power to rule China. Help you rule China. So who will you be influenced by? Your scheming uncle or your loyal eunuchs? And towards the end of the Han Dynasty, a string of child emperors allowed more and more power to fall into the hands of the eunuchs.
Interesting.
Oh no, now they're scheming too. They began handing out government jobs for bribes, heavily taxing the poor for their own wealth. And while you're sitting there eating your popsicle, everyone in your court is literally murdering each other to try and consolidate more power and riches for themselves.
And this is not unique to China. This is the kind of thing that happens everywhere in every generation of every country over time. Again, the idea of wanting power and competing against people for influence, competing against people for authority, it has brought down so many empires.
While all the peasants are outside like, hey, did you guys know there's been a drought out here for 2 years? Guys, Obviously, the people weren't too happy that while they were struggling to survive, they were also being heavily taxed so that the eunuch faction could all have rockin' mansions, complete with swimming pools and Alexas. So finally, when a self-proclaimed Taoist wizard came along and was like, you know whose fault it is that we're all out here starving? It's the emperor and his posse. They've lost their mandate from heaven, and the imperial family must be destroyed with...
Interesting to see the parallel here to... again, Nicholas II, because there you had kind of a mysterious wizard guy in the form of Rasputin, but he was actually a friend, at least of the Tsarina, the Tsar's wife, and he becomes a part of what causes that dynasty to collapse, the Romanov dynasty, because people see Rasputin as having undue influence, and they turn on him and therefore turn on the royal family. This guy's actually leading the charge against the royal family.
With an unrelenting, furious wrath. Also, check this out. Huh?
Yeah.
Can you tell what it is yet? Ta-da! It's a little kitty cat. Look at her little ears. The people loved his political philosophy. He promised them land reforms, and his followers grew in number. They began arming themselves and wearing yellow turbans.
Is that a baguette? This guy's armed with a baguette, and he's wearing like a, I don't know, like... you know, one of those things you'd wear if you were a construction worker on the side of the road to be seen better. I love it.
And they also developed a really catchy slogan. In the year 184, the Yellow Turban Rebellion broke out across China, with millions rising up against the Han Dynasty, and the imperial government in the capital city freaked out. With all their internal bickering, they were completely unprepared and unable to deal with such a huge rebellion. So they were forced to call on independent warlords from across the empire to help them deal with this situation. Some big names took part in the fighting. I'm talking the likes of the great Cao Cao, the tyrannical Dong Zhou, Liu Bei, Sun Jian, and many other Chinese names I am definitely not pronouncing correctly. These warlords crushed the rebellion in their own respective regions, and with casualties in the millions, the Han Dynasty breathed a huge sigh of relief.
You know, this is an important aspect of Eastern Asian history that I don't think a lot of people in the West are aware of, just how many millions of people died in some of these wars. You know, we think of things like World War I and World War II as being kind of the big, deadliest wars in history, but in terms of percentage of population, not even close. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, as it turns out, the deadliest war, at least in terms of ancient wars, is the Three Kingdoms War. We're talking 36 to 40 million people, and that was 2,000 years ago. I mean, you can't even begin to comprehend. What was the world population at that time? I'm curious about that. We'll look that up in just a minute. But in medieval period, again, the Mongol conquests, we're talking East Asia, 30 to 40 million. A rebellion in China, 13 to 36 million. Conquests of Timur, which is Eurasia, so that's a little further west, but again, it's Asia. Just unbelievable death tolls. World War II, 85 million, but we're talking, 80 years ago, so much more modern time period. Transition from the Ming to Qing dynasties. The Taiping Rebellion, 20 to 70 million people. And this was going on at the same time as the American Civil War. The American Civil War killed maybe 700,000 people. And in America, that's like our bloodbath that we had. And at the same time that was going on, you had a war that killed maybe 100 times that many people going on at the same time. Second Sino-Japanese War, same thing. So, I mean, most of the deadliest wars in human history, and even World War II, involved large numbers of Chinese people. Let's take a look at what the world population was at the time that this Three Kings Rebellion is, Three Kingdoms War is killing 40 million people. So the estimate here is perhaps 200 million people on the entire planet at the time that this is happening. So we're talking 10% of the world's population. Now, what percentage of the Chinese population is that? Is my next question. So there were censuses done in Chinese history at that time. So modern estimates put it around 61 million people, which would be a third of the world's population at that time. And maybe a third to one half of that total dies in the Three Kingdoms War, maybe even more than that. So that's what a big deal this conflict is in world history. We just don't know a lot about it in the West.
But what they didn't realize is that by relying on all the warlords and their armies, they had essentially diminished their own central control over the empire. And many of the warlords now held the power to act almost completely independently and rule over their own local regions themselves. Back in the capital, the emperor and his son were having a little chat. Listen, I know we've had our ups and downs, and I spend all of my time with your many, many smoking hot stepmoms instead of you. But what say you and I finally go on a little fishing trip together this weekend? Oh no, I'm having a stroke!
Oh jeez.
And yet another child emperor was on the throne. This time, however, instead of the eunuch faction gaining even more power, this child emperor's uncle became his regent, who also just so happened to be the head of the imperial army, He Jin. Man, I hate those sneaky, lying, cheating eunuchs. Hey Warlord Yuan Shao, what should we do? Kill them all.
Okay.
Right on. You can't kill the eunuchs. They're a vital part of this empire's governance. And also, they paid me a lot of money to say that about them. Ah, come on! No! So He Jin and Yuan Shao decided the empress may need more convincing. And so they called in an infamous, feared, tyrannical, overweight warlord from the northwest to help convince her. That man was Dong Zhou, and he set out for the capital city with his army. Hey guys, I heard a rumor that He Jin was planning on killing us. Then why don't we kill him first? And so it was. They lured him to the palace with a forged letter from his sister, and when he got there, they lobbed off his head.
See, this is the the problem with these kinds of plots. You've got to carry it out before word gets out, or you get the plot turned around on you. I was reading the other day, and I don't remember where it was, about a situation where some ruler was going to get rid of some of the people who worked for him. And he told them, basically, you're going to be executed tomorrow, but first I want you to, do some work for me today. And so in the middle of the night, they killed him first. I don't remember the details of it, but you have to, when these plots happen, you have to pull them off. You have to pull them off quickly and efficiently, or else it's going to unravel and turn on you.
Kill them all.
Oh.
Imperial forces stormed the palace, and the eunuchs were all massacred. The peasants, who were still...
Wait. Is that Adolf Hitler's dad spanking one of the eunuchs in the back? I'm sure that's what's happening here. That looks like Alois Hitler from the Hitler video. That's a fantastic reference to that one. I love it. I don't know what's going on with these sheep, goat things here, dragons. I don't know what they are. I'm sure there's other references I'm missing.
Still suffering from drought and starvation, saw what was going on, and began to riot. The emperor and his brother were forced to flee the city, which was now in flames, and the feared, nasty, tyrannical, bloated Dong Zhou had just arrived. He found the emperor and his brother wandering the hills outside of the city, and was understandably confused. So he scooped up the emperor, went to the capital, and was like, "Hey guys, what's up? I see the capital is on fire. Also, I'm here with my army, and I have the emperor with me." Wait a minute, the capital is on fire, I'm here with my army, and I have the emperor. Screw you guys, I'm in charge. So now Dong Zhou ruled over the Han Dynasty as...
A lot of times, possession of the child ruler meant you were the ruler. The first thing that Richard III does when he begins the process of usurping the throne from his nephew is get possession of his nephew, Edward V. Edward V had been with his uncle on his mother's side, Lord Rivers. And so Richard comes in and scoops him away, and that then gives him the ability to have leverage in the situation, and that's what's happening here too. You don't want to be seen as overthrowing the emperor. So by having the emperor, you're helping rule in his name. So you're seen as a loyal servant of the emperor rather than a tyrant that you really are.
The emperor's regent. His first act was to say to the emperor, "Hey man, no hard feelings, but I like your little brother better, so I'm actually making him emperor instead of you, so you're free to go do whatever you want."
Kill him.
Actually, yeah, that feels better.
We talk about that all the time. You can't have a former ruler or a very powerful claimant to a throne out there alive. I know it sounds callous, but that's the reality of the world. Because then they become a source of rebellions. Because there can always be, if people are looking for an excuse to rebel, what a better excuse than putting the rightful emperor on the throne. So this is just kind of how things had to be done, unless you're in the Byzantine Empire. And then you don't have to kill them, you just have to blind them. That was a big thing they liked to do.
Donehoo ruled with an iron fist, and he did whatever the flip he wanted. He made absolute decisions himself, showing no regard for the monarchy. He had his opponents or those who disagreed with him killed. He broke protocol, doing things like keeping his sword when approaching the emperor, wearing shoes in the court,
Crocs.
sleeping in the emperor's bed, and worst of all, he would walk in the presence of the emperor. You were meant to trot.
So this is all definitely done on purpose. It's his way of exerting his authority. It's his way of saying, you know what, I'm really the one in charge here. All of you peasants need to obey the rules with the emperor. I don't need to.
The other warlords around the empire hated him, and so they said, something needs to be done about this guy. What say we form a coalition and oust him? And it was agreed. Warlords from across China, their armies amounting to 100,000 men, allied together against the tyranny of Donehoo. Yuan Shao's coalition consisted of some of the nation's most capable leaders, including his half-brother Yuan Shu, the great Cao Cao, and Sun Jian. But Donehoo had an ace up his sleeve. His protege and adopted son, one of the most skilled and feared warriors in all of China. It's Lu Bu. This guy was a beast of a man. He never lost a duel, and no other warlord dared challenge him to one. He was also famous for betraying just about every warlord he ever fought for, something that Donehoo didn't seem too concerned about. The coalition attacked Donehoo in Luoyang, and in particular, Sun Jian's forces inflicted a heavy defeat against him, and he was forced to flee to the city of Chang'an. After this initial success, however, the war entered into a stalemate. The warlords in the coalition realized it was going nowhere, and also they all secretly hated each other, so they all went home. Donehoo was safe, until... Legend has it that a government official in Chang'an had a daughter who was hot, super hot. He invited Lu Bu to his home, and promised Lu Bu that someday he could marry his daughter. Then, he invited Donehoo to his house and did the exact same thing. Donehoo was so smitten that he insisted on taking her as his concubine immediately. And when Lu Bu heard the news, he was pretty unhappy. Hey man, aren't you worried that you stole Lu Bu's girl and betrayal is like his personal hobby? Lu Bu? Betray me? No way, man. Never gonna happen.
And this is the problem with the super egos that some leaders like this have. When they think they can get away with anything and do what they want, they start to feel invincible. You see elements of this in leaders that win a lot of military victories throughout history. Even people like Robert E. Lee, for example, started to get this kind of invincibility complex, which is how you end up with Gettysburg and the stupidity of things like Pickett's Charge. Everybody around him knew it would fail, but he had gotten so used to winning that he didn't think that anything could happen like that. And this guy just feels invincible at this point.
Ah, crap. Lu Bu, along with other government officials, assassinated the tyrannical Donehoo. Then they left his body burning in the streets. Some sources say he was so fat and oily, he kept on burning for days. Nice. So with Donehoo dead, and the power of the Han government essentially decimated, China was left with a huge power gap, and a ton of warlords who all slept soundly at night dreaming of being the one to fill it. Here we enter into a crazy and chaotic period of civil war all across China, with so many people, so much betrayal, so much intricacy, it makes Game of Thrones look like a Dr. Seuss publication. But just to give you an idea of how crazy and chaotic it was, see if you're able to keep up with this. Are you ready? Here we go. Here's a rough map of the warlords throughout the Han Dynasty at the time. Half-brothers Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu were both in a power struggle for who would become the figurehead of their family. Yuan Shu made alliances with warlords in the north, along with Sun Jian, the guy who defeated Donehoo. Yuan Shao also made alliances with Liu Biao in the south and Cao Cao, who was an amazing strategist and general. All of these warlords began fighting each other. Cao Cao began building his own strength by subjugating nearby remnants of the Yellow Turban Rebellion into his own forces.
And this is how you end up with a third to one half or maybe more of the people dying in these wars, because it's not just one side versus the other. It's one side versus the other versus the other versus the other versus the other. You got like 20 different sides going on, constantly changing hands, constantly fighting other people. It's a recipe for just disaster. But because there were so many people, even though they weakened themselves to this point, they still made up such a large part of the world's population. You know, in other times, later in history, something like this happens, you'd have an outside force come in and probably just take over the whole lot of them.
Down south, things weren't going so well for Sun Jian, as he was killed in an ambush, so Sun 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 Ce took over. Then, Yuan Shu got pushed back to the river Huai, so he ordered Sun Ce to take the territory of warlord Liu Chang. Then Sun Ce went off to capture territories in the east for himself. Cao Cao's family lived in this province over here. One day, they were murdered. Oh no, Cao Cao held the province's governor responsible, and so he launched a cruel invasion in which he pillaged cities and murdered over 100,000 civilians. The governor sent out a call for help, and a very popular, likable warlord by the name of Liu Bei came to his aid. However, while Cao Cao was away fighting, a rebellion was staged against him in his home province by none other than it's Lu Bu. Cao Cao rushed home and defeated Lu Bu, who fled to the east, which by now had been inherited by Liu Bei. Then Lu Bu, surprise surprise, launched a rebellion against Liu Bei, who fled to Cao Cao. Together, Cao Cao and Liu Bei would go on to invade and defeat Lu Bu. Lu Bu offered to join Cao Cao, and Cao Cao considered the offer. But his advisors were like, no way man, this guy's betrayed literally everyone he ever worked for. And so boohoo, Lu Bu was executed. Next, Cao Cao convinced the emperor to move in with him. Now he's in control of the Han government, something that made his allies very jealous. Yuan Shu, out of nowhere, decides to declare himself emperor of the new Zhong dynasty. Nobody liked that. His allies cut ties with him. The imperial government ordered.
It's one thing to fight for your area of the world, to fight for your territory and your dominance over that region, but to make yourself emperor, that doesn't sit well with anybody.
Everyone to kill him. He tried to flee to his brother Yuan Shao, but died of illness on the way. Sun Ce took over his territory, and then got assassinated. So his brother, Sun Chen, took over. Liu Bei turned on Cao Cao, but got obliterated, and was forced to flee south. Yuan Shao finally defeated the warlord to his north, and could now focus south. He declared war on his ally Cao Cao, but was defeated at the Battle of Guandu.
So it's basically like one of those free-for-all Hearts of Iron 4 games. Like I've played a few times the state mod where each of the 50 states is its own kingdom, and then you slowly start wiping out the other ones until you grow until there's only a few left. And so that's what's happening here. You're slowly seeing the warlords get defeated, and so you're going to end up with just a couple of them that are going to vie for rule of the kingdom.
Cao Cao has now united the north, and he turned his attention to the south. In particular, Liu Biao's province was becoming a powerful threat, so Cao Cao attacked him. Liu Bei was now fighting for Liu Biao, and he held Cao Cao off for a while. But then Liu Biao died and his son took over, and immediately surrendered to Cao Cao. Liu Bei was horrified, and he fled southward to try and maintain control of the province. Cao Cao was on an absolute roll, and it looked like he would be the one to take control of China. He began making plans to attack both Liu Bei and Sun Qian, and the two of them, seeing where things were headed, met up and decided to form an alliance. Now I know that was a lot to take in.
Now, that works great until you eliminate the other one, and then at some point you're going to have to face each other. And they probably both understood that, but at least it gives you a better chance.
But all you really need to know at this point is that this guy is on his way to taking over everything, and he's about to throw his full weight at the southern warlords. These two have one chance, one battle, to prevent him from invading the south. And that battle was the famous Battle of Red Cliffs. To take the south, Cao Cao would need to control and cross the mighty Yangtze River. He had over 200,000 men to face against Liu Bei and Sun Qian's combined force of 50,000. How would they stand a chance when they were so outnumbered?
Tactics.
Legend says most of Sun Qian's advisors pleaded with him to surrender, but then he smashed up a table and they all backed down. Luckily, Cao Cao's forces were ravaged by disease and exhaustion, and his northern soldiers weren't too comfortable on ships. So when Cao Cao sailed down the river and the two sides met for an initial skirmish at Wulin, Cao Cao was unable to inflict a defeat against the allies. Then, one of Sun Qian's men came up with a very sneaky plan. He sent Cao Cao a letter, pretending that he and others wanted to defect to his side, and offered to bring him some of Liu Bei and Sun Qian's finest ships. Little did Cao Cao know, however, that those ships were full of flammable reeds.
Nice.
As they approached his fleet, they were set alight and destroyed his ships and camp. Seeing the situation as hopeless, Cao Cao ordered a difficult retreat through the rain and marshlands.
This is, the kind of stuff you have to do when you're heavily outnumbered and outpowered. This is what the U.S. did in the American Revolutionary War. It's about outlasting. It's about outsmarting. It's about dropping back until you see a favorable situation. It's about using deception and things like this. This is what you have to do to even the odds.
In which more of his men fell to illness and disease. The underdogs had won, and Cao Cao would never again have another chance to take the south. Following that, the three warlords took some time to finish off some smaller competitors in their own regions, and by the year 214, China looked a little bit like this. Cao Cao continued to try to penetrate the southern regions, but had no success, and even lost the Hanzhong region to Liu Bei in 217. The former allies eventually fell out over who should own this territory here, with Sun Qian coming out on top.
Only a matter of time.
In 220, Cao Cao died of a head disease, and was replaced by his son, Cao Pi. Cao Pi convinced the Emperor of Han to abdicate, and then proclaimed himself the Emperor of the new state of Wei. Liu Bei followed suit, declaring himself the true Emperor of Shu Han, and a few years later, Sun Qian joined in the fun and declared himself Emperor of Wu. And so now you have a number of kingdoms in China. How many? Count them. 1, 2, 3. 3 kingdoms. Except, actually, they weren't kingdoms, they were dynasties. And when
empires,
the 3 kingdoms finally formed, not a whole lot happened. For the
we have to remember that the concept of nationhood doesn't really exist in this time, anywhere in the world, really. These are about dynasties, like you said. These are about families that rule regions. You didn't serve your country, you served your lord. So it's just a different way we have to look at things.
Next 3 decades, they continued to engage in combat, but it almost always ended in stalemate, and nobody really got anywhere. So how did it all end? Did Cao Cao's descendants eventually realize his dream of unifying China? Not quite. Instead, the 3 kingdoms became victims of the usual problems that plagued Chinese dynasties. In Wu, Sun Qian's descendant became a tyrant, who was more interested in spending time with his concubines than governing. In Shu Han,
History
a
rhymes.
powerful, corrupt, eunuch faction rose up, and by now we all know how that ends. And in Wei, a string of young emperors gave way for a powerful family, the Sima clan, to take control of the dynasty's government. This Sima clan recognized the weak state Shu and Wu had been reduced to, and so they began making plans. I've just received this letter that says Wei is planning to attack us. Should we make preparations for war? Nah, it's probably nothing to worry about. Let's do absolutely nothing. Sounds good to me. Wei launched a full-scale invasion into Shu, which fell within a year. Then Sima Yan forced the Wei emperor to abdicate, and proclaimed himself emperor of the new Jin dynasty. In the year 279, Jin launched an invasion of Wu, and finally unified China in the year 280. The pattern of rising and falling dynasties, division, and reunification would continue in China for centuries to come.
And as we already looked earlier, you see rebellions happening and civil wars happening, and every one of them involves the deaths of multi-millions of people. Just unfathomable carnage in a place where you have this large of a population.
Right now you may be asking yourself, but wait a minute, what would have happened if Cao Cao had his way and unified China? Or what if Lu Bu never assassinated Dong Zhou and he continued to rule over the Han dynasty? What about if one of these smaller warlords had risen to the top? Dang it, what if I want to be a warlord during the downfall of the Han dynasty? Whoa, partner.
3 kingdoms of the Total War game, which is a lot of fun, has a really cool multiplayer component to it, but we're going to wrap it up right there because he's obviously going to get into talking about that. I do have a link in the description to the original video. Make sure you support them. All of the revenue from the ad revenue from me doing oversimplified reactions goes to them anyway. So just by watching this reaction, you're making them money. So I don't feel real obligated to show his ad because he's already making the money off of this anyway. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you would, and we will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.